I've seen a lot of resumes in my time, and I can tell you there's one thing on your resume that can really create a red flag for hiring managers. And that one thing is your employment history. Now, if you're just starting out and you have a history of like 0 to 1 jobs, you don't have to worry about this right now. But if you're not careful, you can fall into this trap. So, what is this one thing? Well, this thing is called title jumping. So, what do I mean by that? I know it sounds like an old corny Western term, but title jumping is moving from job to job, usually in less than 24 months. And each new job gets you a new title and gets you more pay. Now, on paper, that sounds great, but there is a cost to it, right? Every time you go to get a job somewhere, every time you take on a new job, you are an investment for that company. And when you first start out, your value is pretty low. That company is betting on your potential. They're looking for what you can contribute in the long term. ROI takes time. Return on investment takes time. So a typical model of somebody starting off, first 3 months, you're learning the language, you're learning about the people, you're trying to find out where the bathroom and where the coffee maker is. The 3 to 6 months, you're contributing, but only really slightly. Now, 6 to 9 months, you're starting to actually learn about the business and how the business connects to whatever you do. So you're starting to add some value here. And then 12 to 36 months, that's where the true ROI kicks in. So most companies that, they want 3 years out of you. And if you jump before that point, you now it's really hard for them to do the math and make it make sense. Like, why would I want to keep somebody if I see that they have a pattern of jumping from job to job in less than 24 months? You then become a little bit of a potential bad investment for them. Now, I'm not saying you have to stay at a company for 3 years. You need to be loyal to every company. That's not what I'm saying at all. And there are valid reasons to leave a company, and I'm going to go over them later on. But what I am trying to say is, in order to protect your long-term value, your long-term leverage, you really need to think about when and why you're jumping. Now, the other part of this is you can really outprice yourself in the market, right? You can basically make yourself unable to get that next role that you want because, let's say you're at a senior director and you want to become a director or a VP, I'm sorry, but those salaries are just now you're clashing with the basement of another salary, and it makes it hard for you to leave. You essentially have golden handcuffs. And every new role expects new things from you. There's maturity. What do you look like a leader? Do you sound like a leader? Not look like a leader. You sound like a leader when they meet with you. What's your judgment like? They're going to test your judgment in an interview, especially for higher up leadership roles. They're absolutely going to check to say, hey, we're going to give you some what if scenarios, and they're going to see how you react. And they'll be able to tell pretty quickly if you're just spouting off something you just, you know, read off from ChatGPT, or you really have some real world experience. And then in line with real world experience, there's what I call scar tissue. Like, what obstacles have you encountered? What real challenges have you faced? Is one of the reasons you jump from ship to ship that every time there's a problem, you leave. So you've never really had to deal or at least finish out a problem. So that's a thing that people look for in the interview process. So essentially, what happens when you jump from title to title potentially is that your titles start to outpace your experience, and that's a real problem. And like I was saying, like the people doing this aren't necessarily greedy at all. That's not what they're doing it for. They're trying to move up in the world. It makes total sense. But you're just when they do it, they're just getting ahead of their real growth. So and that can create a problem that will eventually catch up to them. The market will eventually correct as you move up that ladder. So moving up too fast, it can actually slow you down over the long haul. And so like the big problem, and I think we all know this, if you work for a company, titles are kind of like they're like dopamine for your ego. Companies kind of give them out like candy in some cases, and the companies know that this is a big like dopamine hit, and that's why they'll do it. That's why you'll see people, if they feel like someone's going to leave, they'll give them a little title hit, they'll give them a little salary hit, and that makes people feel good for a while. They feel recognized, which is what we all want. Yeah, like I said, fast growth feels really good. I mean, it feels like, wow, I'm being recognized. But sometimes it may not be earned. And the earning part is critical if you're trying to move on to that next level. So if you want to become the senior director, you want to become the VP, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We don't have to go up that high. We can just be down at the manager level. It's important that you earn the role and not just jump to new roles so you can get the money. Again, it's not a greed thing necessarily. People are ambitious, and that's perfectly okay. But you have to be careful about how fast you actually go. And the other big thing, this is separate from the red flag part. This is more of like a personal thing that I've seen out there is that some title jumpers that I've worked with, they just lack self-awareness. Like they actually believe the narrative that's been created about them a little too much, and they become a little hard to coach because they see themselves as that director or that VP. We had one person, she worked for us and she was a VP. We brought her on and we quickly realized, wow, there's nothing there. And it wasn't that we were mad so much as we felt bad for two things. One, we didn't recognize it sooner. And two, we kind of felt bad for her because it was like someone promoted her way too fast. And then we got the outcome. And it doesn't help us. And it definitely isn't going to help her. There are people who go through work and they'll just stay in once they hit that plateau, they'll just move from job to job because they know at some point imposter syndrome becomes crazy scary for them. So instead of looking for the next jump in role, they realize that, I'm not going to get another role. So they'll just be happy doing a lot of laterals. But again, getting the jumps, great early on, but it really does eventually catch up to you. The market does correct. I did say earlier, there are many reasons to leave. So I don't want to put it out there that this is, hey man, you need to stay at a company. You need to be loyal. Not at all, right? If a company is toxic, you're working with toxic leadership, you have to think about whether or not you want to stay there. If you're not learning, if you're like me and you constantly need to be learning something new or be engaged, well, maybe it's time to look somewhere new. If you have a shrinking role, right? If you have a company where you feel like either the company's either shrinking or maybe they're quietly firing you, maybe it's time to move on. And of course, if the company is outright breaking promises to you, again, another reason to look beyond where you're at. But if none of those are happening, you really need to think about why are you leaving? It's very enticing, especially early in your career, to just keep bouncing, right? And just getting the bump in pay, getting that bump in title. But it does catch up with you and it does become a red flag on an interview. What I found is that most of these title jumpers, they're not impatient people so much as they're ambitious. I said that earlier. But ambition without the patience can really end up costing you. The smartest move isn't necessarily the next title. It's becoming the person that the title assumes you are. I will tell you, once the market really decides that you have skipped steps, it's really hard for you to go backward. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to our next conversation.